it's like forgivences, but Selichot is the service that's the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah. I did talk about that because I told you that that's an Ashkenazi tradition. That I have your thing, so you can't.
It's okay.
Okay. So that's the Saturday night before an Ashkenazi tradition where we start the High Holy Day period, right? Ashkenazi is the German, Eastern European Jews, good. And then I told you the Sephardic Jews do the whole month, blowing shofar every day. I told you I lived by the, see, it all comes back. All right. Tashlich. Tashlich, did we talk about Tashlich last week? I think we did. The casting, when you throw breadcrumbs or lint into a flowing stream of water, right? Symbolizing casting your sins away. Lishana tova tikatevu. Gotta let other people get a chance. Lishana tova tikatevu. Does anyone know? Good. May you be inscribed for a good year. That's the greeting that we give to people on the new year. And the tikatevu, be written or be inscribed, is that theological idea I was talking about of God writing in the book of life our destiny for the coming year based on how we acted. And we talked a little bit about the problems that some more liberal or progressive Jews would have with that theology. Yom Tov, you guys know. Siddur, you know, right? Siddur would go anywhere. Siddur is a prayer book, right? Machzor is a special prayer book for the festivals. Okay, so we wouldn't say take out your Siddur on Rosh Hashanah, we would say take out your Machzor, which is the special prayer book for the festivals. Not just Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but also Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot. Okay. Any other questions from last week when we talked about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? No, because I just remembered we have another holiday to do today.
You can take it because I was the week when I celebrate.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, don't forget it. All right, so hopefully Rabbi's last half hour with you all helped clarify some of the things that we've been talking about up to this point. And I know that I have given kind of brief introductions of Talmud and rabbinic law and the Judaism that we practice today is not the Judaism we read about in the Torah. Right? So hopefully today you got a clearer picture of how that plays out. Yes? Good. So today, and I also know Rabbi started talking about Sukkot and I wasn't here. So there may be some repetition. I'm not going to apologize because repetition is a beautiful thing. And what you will have now is text that's going to be talking about some of the things he was talking about. So first, I gave you different places where Sukkot appears in the Torah. And I simplify it with this from a feast to a sacrifice to a booth and branches, because it's not necessarily that evolution took place in that order. But those are the three different ways of celebrating Sukkot that we read about in the Torah. So first, 3 times a year you shall hold a festival for me. These are all 3 of the festivals that we'll talk about. You shall observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is Passover, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you, at the set time in the month of Aviv. For in it you went forth from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. And the Feast of the Harvest, of the first fruits of your work, of what you sow in the field, that will become Shavuot. And the Feast of Ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the results of your work from the field, and that is Sukkot. Right now, it's a little confusing. This says at the end of the year. Last week, I showed you a text that one of the reasons we know that Rosh Hashanah is the new year is because Sukkot is also described as the beginning of the year. What we get is what are we talking here? What's important in this description of the festivals? Harvest, agriculture, right? So here, end of the year, beginning of the year really is the same thing. That we know that this is the time when the agricultural year is changing. Okay? And at least for Shavuot and Sukkot, they're based on the harvest. And if we think about a primitive people, and not just a primitive people, when you think about what people pray for today, right? The harvest was people's livelihood. Right? There were no stock traders. Right? So you don't pray for the stock market. You prayed for your corn. Well, maybe not corn. I guess that's new. But, right? You prayed for your wheat. So wanting to have a good harvest and being thankful for a good harvest, or saying, wow, maybe I didn't have such a good harvest, but I hope I do next year. Right? That's where these festivals originate. And I know Rabbi talked about potential pagan origin. Yeah? Right? And that, again, the role of the harvest, the role of agriculture, especially in paganism, is extremely evident. And then the question, when we're looking at what Jews do and what Jews don't do, right? I like to think, some people get upset when I talk about this, and if you don't like it, you can pretend I don't say it. But when we look at what Jews do and what Jews don't do, I think that to a strong degree, a lot of that shows us what the people were doing at the time, right? So when we're told to put a I know mezuzah, but what's to put something on your door, right? And now we put a mezuzah on our door, right? And we are told, thou shalt. That's one of the things that you're supposed to do, right? But it's also something that seems a little strange. My guess is that having, and we see evidence of this, that having some kind of amulet on your door in order to protect your house was a common custom of the time. So as we're figuring out what Jews will do, you're either going to say, thou shalt not put an amulet on your door, or thou shalt put an amulet on your door, but you're going to do it in a Jewish way. Okay? When we're told, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, right, which becomes not mixing milk and meat, that's a pretty strange thing. Have I told you guys my example? How many of you are parents? The example that I always go to is you don't tell your kids, don't jump rope on the roof. Right? Why would it be stupid to tell your child, don't jump rope on the roof? You're going to give them the idea, right? There's only one reason that I can imagine why a parent would say to their child, don't jump rope on the roof. And that's when you see your kid jump roping on the roof. Right? So when I see, thou shalt not boil a kid, or don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, don't slaughter a baby goat and then go right and boil it in its mother's milk, it seems to me that was some kind of ritual that people were doing. Okay? When I see to take these things and shake them, right, either that's something that was an innovation in Jewish tradition. And I do think, I'm not saying that everything Jews do is taken from somewhere else. It might be an innovation, or it's something that people were doing. Maybe they were doing it for a different reason. But we say, yeah, do it, but do it Jewishly. I call it Judaizing other traditions. How many of you have heard the melody, and for those of you who've been to synagogue, Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra. The melody is from a German drinking song, right? So what happened was, this is a topic, but as a way to bring Jews in, we said, what are people doing? They're going to bars and drinking, right? If we can Judaize that melody, right? Take the melody that people know, take the rhythms and the modes that people know, bring it into the synagogue and make it Jewish, then people will be more comfortable. So by taking something like this that may have been something else, right? The Feast of Unleavened Bread may have been something else, but we Judaize it, and it becomes part of Jewish tradition. So taking these harvest festivals. Harvest festivals existed in all of the different religious cultures at the time. Right? So if we didn't have harvest-based festivals, people would be very upset. Right? Does that make sense? You don't have to agree with me. Right? It doesn't say in the Torah, and we took the pagan harvest festivals and Judaized them. Right? So you can disagree with me. Yeah?
How about giving gifts on Hanukkah or Christmas?
Well, yeah, that would be another modern example of Judaizing another tradition. Okay. Right, but like Christmas trees is a place where a lot of families will go the other route, right? Saying, making that a thou shalt not. I'm not saying that if you have one, it's bad, but I'm saying that right, I shouldn't have done that. Okay. All right, we don't need to read Deuteronomy. And I'm also, Numbers, okay? Just like all of our other festivals, there was a sacrificial element to Sukkot. On the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall observe a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. We're used to hearing that by now. What do we call it? Yom Tov. Good. Good. 7 days you shall observe a festival of the Lord. You shall present a burnt offering, an offering by fire with pleasing odor to the Lord. 13 bulls of the herd, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs. They shall be without blemish. The meal offerings with them. Then, 17, second day, 12 bulls of the herd, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs. Anyone else going to make another Christmas, right? And a partridge. Okay. But each day, they're going to go through with what the sacrifice is for that day. I didn't give you the whole passage. Then, Leviticus 23. This is the chapter I keep going back to with you all. And this is where we're going to hear the Sukkot that we know the most today. You're also, by the way, seeing different names for the holiday. Right? In Exodus, we saw the Feast of Ingathering. Right? That was in Exodus 23:16. In Deuteronomy 16, we saw the Feast of Booths. What is the Feast of Booths? Booths is Sukkot. Good. Sukkot is the Hebrew word for booths. In Numbers, they didn't even give us a name, just the 15th day of the 7th month. Now, Leviticus, say to the Israelite people, on the 15th day of the 7th month, again, there shall be a feast of booths to the Lord, to last 7 days. The first day shall be a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. 7 days you shall bring offerings by fire to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall observe a sacred occasion and bring an offering by fire to the Lord. It is a solemn gathering. You shall not work at your occupations. So how many days is Sukkot? 7. Usually, well, we haven't done Passover yet. Passover is also a 7-day holiday. Okay? What is going to be our Yemei Tov, our Yom Tovs on Passover? It's a 7-day holiday. 1 and 7, right? Which is what we would expect for Sukkot, but it's not. And right, Michael, in conservative and Orthodox outside of Israel, it would be 1, 2, 6, 7 for Passover.
7, 8.
7, 8, thank you.